Hello, my name's Lizzie Karen, and welcome to the channel I've created on my dreams of Atlantis. This is a dream about a lovely man called Edria, and it's at the time of Japay. In this dream, I experience a story being told to me in the dream. I didn't experience it firsthand, but the dream felt like I was just being told a story. The story was told to me when I went to visit my brother, who was in hiding at the time. The dream starts with me waiting for someone to collect me in a small flying vehicle. It arrived a short distance away and I walked towards it. Then the front opened up and I stepped in. I recognized the pilot and asked her how things are. The usual stuff, you know. We get talking about the latest leader of Tantal, called Japay. Sometimes he's the butt of a few jokes, but this time it was very serious what was happening. His narcissistic ways and, utter stupidity were the talk of all of Tantal, otherwise known as the Atlanteans. At least the ones that no longer lived there, I should say. To those who did continue to live there, he was someone to be feared, and they kept fairly quiet about his goings-on. Well, mostly. To understand the story, you first need to understand how things changed under Japay. Japay was the leader of the revolution that removed Bela of Kron. The changes that Bela had instigated, with good intentions, led Tantal down a path that eventually led to inequity. Initially, it was not bad, and people were happy they could have as many children as they wanted and go wherever they wanted, etc. But over time, this led to a great divide. Rich versus poor, educated versus uneducated, powerful versus helpless. It was such a high level of dissatisfaction amongst the ordinary people that it created a perfect stewing pot or environment, maybe a quagmire, for a revolution to occur. And that revolution is what Japay incited. When the revolution occurred, Tantal civilization was already in a state of disarray. People thought, what could they possibly have to lose by supporting Japay? Japay, being the choice of leader, was based on his promise to the people to repair the inequities. The confidence and ego of Japay was intoxicating, but his confidence was not matched by his ability. For a start, he did not have a complete education, even though he boasted that he had. He had a ridiculously inflated sense of importance and entitlement that manifest in a very haughty style of talking and of gesturing and of even walking. His hair was completely white, and his skin a pale olive colour. His face and body were young, but it was quite an odd look, and this added to his mystique. He wanted to always be the centre of attention, and this was a great driving factor in his participation in anything. So the revolution, to him, was a great opportunity, and when it was happening, he was permanently the centre of attention. He demanded admiration from those around him. It didn't matter how fake the admiration was, or how much it was extracted by force, just as long as he got the admiration he wanted. It seemed to keep him much more calm. But it was impossible for him to maintain any personal relationships, because his lack of concern for others, he had no respect for other people, he had a lack of empathy in general, which meant that he couldn't even see the suffering of others, let alone sympathise. But he was still very quick to demonstrate his personal affront if feeling slighted in any way, so he could feel emotions. But everyone kind of walked on glass around him. The laws that he gave to his people, and eventually to the primitives, were a combination of self-aggrandizement with a small touch of what some might call magnanimously good advice. He was the first ruler to believe that his rules should cover all humans, not just the Tantals that lived in Tantal. He wanted them to be across the board. And he wanted to be adored like a god. And this is quite clear in some of the laws that he gave. And here are the laws anyway, just to give the background. Trust in me, for I am an immortal and no of this world. Worship only me, no one else can do for you as I can. My rules come first, then you can obey the rules of your land that you live in. Be content with the life that you're born into. For everyone, people and animals have their place. Work hard for what is good and right. He obviously would tell you what was good and right. Fight for me when I ask, or you may fight to protect what is yours, but do not strive to get that which is not yours. Be trustworthy and honourable. Be conscious of your own thoughts. Be self-controlled in your reactions, and aim for that which is right and fair. Regularly choose to suffer poverty and abstinence as a reminder to be grateful for what you actually have right now. And appreciate each day as if it were your last. So most of the rules seem to be about him. Trust me, worship me, obey me, be content with it while you're in your life, etc. But there is nothing obvious in the rules about how he will help his people, just how they can give him what he wants. So now with that picture in mind, it will be clearer why things happened the way that they did. So, back to the dream. I'm flying with the pilot, who I know, and we get onto the subject of Japan. She asked if I'm up to date with what's been going on. Well, I knew that he'd been experimenting with how much he could get away with the primitives and how he could get them to respect and obey him. And I knew it would be a tough call for the people of Tantal to accept all this, but he was doing it anyway. What happened was he picked on one group and decided to engage with them through his watchers. The group lived in a mountainous area about 2,000 kilometers north, well, maybe northeast of Tantal, or Atlantis. The place was called the Cursed Mountains. They were named that because it was where one of the tribes came from that had tormented the Tantals before the time of Uran, before they moved to Tantal. But that's another story. So anyway, Japan sent a large group of watchers to the mountains to learn about the people and to work out how to convert them to the new cult of Japan. This was something most people in Tantal found very uncomfortable, I think because everyone knew that he was really a bit bonkers. But he may have been backdropping crazy, but he was even more scary than he was crazy. So the watchers are watching and putting together a plan for achieving Japan's demands. At least that's what they started off trying to do. Eventually, as a group, they decide how ridiculous it is, and they conclude that they really should just leave Tantal and join up with this primitive group instead. and have a more simple life. There were 200 of them that agreed to leave. They were mostly the young ones of under 100 years old, so they had not yet finished their education. Many of them had barely even left their parents. Before formally leaving Tantal, they did return to say their goodbyes and to take with them whatever they needed from when they left. People were permitted to leave, but they just could never return once they had left. So making a decision like that was kind of final, really. There was a young couple who actually led the group and convinced everyone to leave, and they were called Sem and Yaga. They were in love, and they thought it was ever so romantic to start over and build their own civilization away from all the craziness. They were from Tantal, so they were all tall and strong, and they were attractive to the primitives, both males and females alike. They enjoyed the new home that they had made in the wilds, and some of them even took up and had a relationship with the primitive, i.e. they took them as a mate. Others stayed with their original chosen Atlantean mate, and in both cases many children were born. The children were tall and strong like them, even the ones that had one parent that was from the primitives. The Tantals could only get pregnant if they stopped taking the cure, but they could get as many primitives pregnant as they wanted. So the women who were from Tantal had to make the choice to take the time off from the cure to have the babies and then return to it. When they had left Tantal, they did take with them things like basic food machines, tools for agriculture, basically most of the things that they would need for their comfort. But as their population grew, it couldn't really sustain them all. And there was also the problem that the children that they had would not have access to the longevity device, the cure, basically. Anyway, I'll come back to that. So they did as the primitives did and started to eat the way that the primitives had eaten originally, and that included eating meat. And when the animals were scarce, they even hunted and ate their enemy primitives. Pretty horrific stuff, really. So by this stage, the news of their activities had reached both Japay, the current ruler, and Uran, the much-loved original leader of Tantal. Uran stayed firm with his non-interference policy, but his wife, Haya, pleaded with him. She said, "We need to stop these people. They need to do something because they could give the primitives tools for destruction." But Uran stood firm. Then, as predicted by Haya, the outcasts used the knowledge that they had of metals to start making weapons. One built a forge, and not only used it to make weapons, but also taught those who were primitive how to do the same thing and how to use it. They taught other things as well, but nothing as dangerous as making weapons. So, in true Japay form, he sent more people to watch and report back. But this time he sent his most trusted guards. And these were the ones from his special military police force. The four that he sent were utterly horrified. but did nothing. They just watched and, of course, reported back. Here's where the story gets even more interesting. A really gentle, kind man by the name of Idria, a primitive, was taught by one of the original watchers of Tantal the skill of writing. So he was picked by the new watchers to be a person to contact. So Idria was specifically targeted because it was convenient. He regularly would leave the village to get quiet time with his thoughts, and so that was where he was approached by the new watchers. Let's call them Japei's A-team. Japei decided to get his A-team to send the other watchers, the outcast watchers, send them a message through Idria. So they went to see Idria in typical mystical Japei fashion, just so that he would take it thoroughly seriously. And they asked Idria to return to his village with a message to the original watchers to please stop making and teaching weapons. And if they did that, Japei would forgive them and they could continue doing all the other stuff. The A-team told Idria to return to the same place to meet them again in a couple of days with the response from the outcast watchers. And after 2 days, the original outcast watchers returned a message through Idria as it was instructed. And it said that they would stop. They knew the consequences of not obeying Japei, but here's where their stupidity shouldn't really surprise. Only the original outcast watchers stopped making weapons, and those primitives that they had already taught how to do it, they just kept on going. And the watchers had no ability to stop them without killing them. And also by this stage, some of that knowledge had gone as far as other human groups. It's the sort of knowledge that does tend to spread. So Japei sent another message through Idria, and this time it was more threatening. The original outcast watchers begged to be allowed to return and leave behind them all the terrible things that they'd actually caused. But the answer was no, fix it. Kill all the primitives who know about this in your village, then leave and find the others that know and get them as well. And if they do this terrible thing in time, the request would be considered by Japei. The original outcast watchers did what they could to stop the knowledge of metal weapons, but they couldn't bring themselves to kill the people that they'd lived with and trained and had families with. Sadly, the damage couldn't be reversed, and the primitives spread the knowledge of weapons much further. And that happened fairly quickly. The original watchers were now in a very difficult position. They were hated by the people that they had adopted, even the ones they'd had children with. As time went by, they also had the problem that their primitive family grew old and would die in front of them because they couldn't give them the ability to have the cure for aging. Even their own children, the only way they could give it to their children was if they relinquished it themselves. So only the original 200 had the key to aging, the device, but when one died through accident or misadventure, another person could take their device and receive the cure. This became known by the primitives, and some of the bad people amongst them thought that it wasn't such a bad idea to knock off the odd immortal and take their device. So the outcast watchers then became the hunted. When news of this reached Uran, a rescue team was mounted to save those that remained. It is safe to say that the ones who were rescued never ever complained about the life that Uran gave them. And in fact, they were complete converts to the lifestyle that they adopted. And they of all people then fully understood the implications and reasons for some of the original laws of Uran. But when Japay found out that they'd been rescued, he was furious, to say the least. The pilot went on to tell me that apparently Japay had told everyone back in Tantal that he had punished the outcasts for various offences, ranging from gifting the primitives things that they shouldn't know, through to stealing things from Tantal. So he had made up kind of a weird story of strange punishments in order to scare any other Tantals from ever crossing him. In reality, of course, the outcast watchers were in a much better place, and that was not in the proverbial sense. And this is the story that the pilot told me as we were returning to see my brother. And I was even able at that time to meet one of the surviving team when I had got to Uran's home. So you might think that that must be where the story ends, but no, it's not. It's actually a very long story, but let's end it at this stage. The rest of the story will come later. The rest of the story, I'm actually not too sure how it was communicated to me though, but it continues with what happened to Adria, because he'd acted as a messenger and he'd been loyal to Japay. So when he requested to visit Tantal, Japay agreed, and he was collected by the Watchers and he went to visit Tantal. But that's going to be part 2 of the story, so I will continue with that another day. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you all again later.